Hi there to my Patreon supporters. This month is going to be a little different. I was trying to think of ways that I could make this as interesting for you guys as it is for me. I feel a little guilty in terms of how much I enjoy this, how much I enjoy getting these recommendations from you guys. And I realize they're not all recommendations. Some of them you might be punking me. Who knows? Nevertheless, I really enjoy this. So this month, this is going to be a little long, a little indulgent maybe. You might not be interested. Just skip to the end if you want to find out what won. But what I'm going to do is first pour this beer. Milk Stout Nitro, as usual. Don't try this with normal beer. So what I'm going to do is for each thing that you guys have been kind enough to request or recommend for me, I'm going to give you a counter recommendation. Now some of these are a little forced. Some of them are better thought out than others. But at any rate, there's going to be a little bit of it's going to be like a tennis match. You hit the ball to me, I'll hit it back to you guys. Let's just see how this goes. All right. In case you haven't figured it out by now, this is the deal where if you support me for $10 or more a month on my Patreon campaign, once a month I'll send you a message saying, hey, tell me something you'd like me to review, anything, and then I'm going to read over them. We've got a nice even round number of them this month. It's nothing weird like 23 or 17. And I'll read over them, and we're going to randomly draw one of the numbers live on the air here. You'll know there's no shenanigans, no CG, no special effects. I haven't hired any VFX studios. You're going to see it all done right here on this iPad down here. And that's something that I'll put in the queue to review. Now, a quick update. I have in the queue currently, and to force myself after I finish this video, I'm watching the first episode of The Wire at last. It's running on this computer back here. These might be spoilers, don't look at those. So The Wire officially commencing after I hit stop and do all the editing on this. The other thing, Magic Realm, a board game from 1979, won 2 months ago? Maybe 3, no, 2 months ago. And a fellow named Chris, who I know online, was kind enough to send me a copy of it, which was awesome. The weird thing about copies of games from 1979 is in the course of passing from person to person, or maybe someone moves, or board game collections are lumped together, or it gets bought and sold at a garage sale, pieces can go missing. Or in my case, there were a couple pieces missing, but in my case, there were duplicate pieces. So I basically had, it was serviceable, I could still play it. I basically had not broken, depending on how obsessive compulsive you are, broken copy of Magic Realm. Now the cool thing about a 1979 board game like Magic Realm is it's got a crazy online following, including this awesome woman in Snoqualmie, Washington, who runs a website. If you just Google Magic Realm replacement parts, her website is the first hit, and she maintains a collection of replacement parts for this old board game. So you might be wondering, so you buy and you sell them, she's probably making money off of it. No, you just send her a message and say, here's what I have missing. She sends it to you. She doesn't even charge you shipping. It's amazing. So literally today, May 5th, no, what is today, 5th, 6th, whatever. Literally today, this arrived in the mail. These are the things missing. This right here, oh, good Lord, it's not going to read very well, is, believe it or not, it's a magician, it's a staff, like it's not magic, it's like a fighting staff. Oh, good Lord. Is that in focus? Anyway, one side is the active side, one is the, active, unactive, whatever. I'm still learning the rules. The rules for Magic Realm, printed out at a Kinko's in this couple hundred page manual, which, no joke, I love reading through this thing. Also, it arrived today. Here's a little warning. I don't need to show you the little ones. Here's the big one. I'll just show you the big one. I ended up, Magic Realm plays on 20 of these cardboard hexes that are assembled into a map. I ended up having 20 of them. However, I had 2 Dark Valleys, I think. There were 2 Valley hexes. I had a double of something, and therefore something missing. Just today, I got in my caves. Here's the enchanted side of the caves. So I now have a complete set of Magic Realm. That has long been underway, but now it's officially underway with a complete, fully functional version of the game. Let's see what else. The Confessions of St. Augustine. I have no idea what to do with that, but that's also in the queue. So those are the three things I'm working on. We'll have a fourth thing added today. Let's go over these submissions, and I'll throw counter submissions out as well. David D., one of the first things he said was, sorry for you having to watch Barry Lyndon. And I don't recall if he was the one who picked it or if he was just giving an apology on behalf of everyone who had to read me writing about Barry Lyndon. But at any rate, David D., look, here's the deal. I don't mind watching movies or reading books or even playing games that I don't like. I find that instructive. One of the things that I feel strongly about entertainment is you can learn things about yourself and about others. And part of how that works is learning and articulating what you like and don't like and why you do or don't like it. So, watching Barry Lyndon for 3 hours, I might have complained about it, but I valued that experience. I got a lot out of it. So, nobody ever apologized for if you ask me to review something and I end up not liking it. I feel like it's a way of us having a conversation. Not always going to agree with everything you say. You're not always going to agree with everything I say. So, never feel bad if it turns out that I don't like something. Okay? So, that said, David D. said, I would like to request you to review scuba diving. Hopefully the waters are warm enough, he said, because I think he voted for it last December. The waters here in Southern California, it's not as idyllic as, say, Thailand or Florida. So he said maybe the waters are warm enough for that, and even then you don't have to go diving. I'd just like to have you write about it. So, David, if this gets drawn, I will actually do a dive. The problem with doing a dive is it's something that you do with a partner. Generally, people, you don't dive alone. You have a buddy. I don't know anyone here in Southern California who dives, so I'd have to either get someone else certified and work them through the certification process and then go diving with them, or are there Craigslist ads for buddies, for diving buddies? Yikes. But at any rate, David, if this wins, I will do another dive. I relish the opportunity to get back into that. It's been far too long. My counter recommendation, David, if you would like to get a look at what diving is like, and I'd be happy to write about it, but if you really want to look at it, I recommend a documentary called, and I'm not generally into documentaries, but this thing called Diving into the Unknown. It's almost like a heist movie, a heist horror documentary. So these, I think they were Finns, they were diving, and I believe this was in the States somewhere. Was it in Finland? At any rate, they were doing cave diving, which is terrifying to me. I've done some deeper technical diving, just a little bit. I've gone diving in murky lakes where you can't see anything. I've done night diving. That stuff is amazing. One thing I have no desire to ever do is dive in a cave. It just seems terrifying. So this documentary is about these Finns who went diving in a particularly dangerous cave. They knew what they were doing, but things go wrong. And one of them didn't make it out. And the others did, and they went home, and they sort of had to wrestle with their feelings about what happened and what to do about it. And the cave where they dove was shut down for recreational diving after that. It was just deemed too dangerous. They then decided that they were going to go back in that cave and recover their friend's body. And they filmed it. And that's what Diving into the Unknown is. So if you want a kind of a worst case horrifying scenario of what diving can be like, and also the sense of camaraderie for these guys insisting on going back and getting their buddy's body. And the documentary isn't just the dive, it's them talking about it and planning it. So I recommend, there's my counter recommendation. Joseph M. Sent me a copy of Player of Games. Okay, I have so many things that I was going to show you. Oh, here it is. An Ian Banks book that he would like me to review. And he figured maybe he could sort of jumpstart it by sending me a copy of it, which I greatly appreciate. And I'm reading it. I am there. I'm that far into it. Oh, and this was completely unnecessary but endearing. He peppered it with dollar bills. Can you see it there? taped to pages to kind of bribe me through it. Which, oh, good Lord. Joseph, anyway, I appreciate this. That is his choice for this month, and I'm reading it already. So there you go. My counter recommendation, I'm not quite sure what to make of Player of Games yet. I know it's part of Ian Banks' Culture series, and as I'm reading it, I'm remembering, isn't the deal with the Culture series, it's a universe where these sentient drones have come from outer space and they're interacting with humanity, but I think that's the angle, right? So I don't know a lot of science fiction. I'm not the kind of person you want to ask, hey, what science fiction should I read? I am, however, really into horror. So, Joseph M., it seems like you know your sci-fi. You want to recommend me a book to get me into Banks' Culture series. Good. Let me recommend you a bit of horror that I really like. A fellow named Laird Barron, and if you've heard me talk or write about horror, you might have come up. I'm just going to recommend you. It's got a collection called The Occultation, and the titular story, Occultation, is only, it's about 10, 12 pages. Yeah, it's 10 pages. Very short. I can't get this thing out of my head. It is so freaky. It's basically just these two people in a hotel room, just having sex, doing drugs, dozing, and it's not conventional horror. I mean, a lot of Barron is some of it's Lovecraftian, some of it is more contemporary. Barron is an amazing writer, and I'll just counter-recommend as a great example of horror, Occultation, the titular story in this collection. All right, so Player of Games is oh my gosh, we're only on number 2. Number 3, Colton Weststraight, a series on Netflix called Look Who's Back. And I thought, is that the thing where babies talk and Bruce Willis and John Travolta are their voices? Nope. It is a comedy, a German comedy, about Hitler coming back. Couldn't quite tell, didn't want to read too much into it, didn't want to spoil it, but it's a German movie, it's German comedy. That's number 3. Colton, my counter recommendation, generally you don't associate Germans with comedy. I invite you, or actually anyone out there, Google Martina Hill. The difficult thing is finding her clips. A lot of it's like sketch comedy with subtitles. If you don't know German, it's going to be a little bit harder. If you do know German, hopefully you already know who Martina Hill is, but that's what I think of when I think of German comedy. All right, number 4, Andrew S. Now, I couldn't tell so he recommended The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, Volume 1, Squirrel Power. I didn't know if this was a joke. Sure enough, that is the name of a Squirrel Girl comic. Now, I know there's a Squirrel Girl. I have sort of joked about her before because it seems a little absurd, but I confess I don't know much about her. My Squirrel Girl in Marvel Heroes is only like level 3. I know she summons squirrels, and that's about it. So this was requested by Andrew S. I Googled it, and from looking at it, I can't tell if Squirrel Girl is a serious thing or if it's a joke. I don't know. Anyway, that's number 4. If it wins, maybe we'll find out. There's one thing worse than expecting a recommendation for sci-fi from me. It's expecting a recommendation for a graphic novel, for comic books. I will, however, vouch for, and I don't remember who recommended this to me, but I wish I could. This is this weird thing, I don't know how hard it is to get, called Jimmy Corrigan, World's Smartest Kid. And it's a comic book. Look, pictures, words. And it's not a superhero. I don't know how much to say about it, but it is a odd instance of someone grappling with middle age and childhood. There's no one among us to whom at least one of those isn't relevant. So Jimmy Corrigan, World's Greatest Kid. It's not your typical comic book, but I recommend it. All right, so Andrew S's number 4, Andrew S's The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, Volume 1, Squirrel Power. It's actually what it's called. Craig, number 5, would like a review of Expedition Vikings that just came out. I've seen a little bit of it, and so far I'm partial to Expedition Conquistadors, their previous game. Maybe Vikings could use a little more work, I don't know. But at any rate, that's Craig's request. I will counter recommend Renowned Explorers with the Emperor's Challenge DLC. I love that thing to pieces. If you want a game with tactical combat and this sort of RPG exploration, I don't think you can do any better than Renowned Explorers. Love that game. Number 6, Jarmo P. Oh boy, a book from 1979 that he said he read, and I think Jarmo said it was somehow illuminating about it had something to do with video games, but it's from 1979. Those hadn't been invented yet. Anyway, it's called Pilgrim in the Micro World: I, Mind, and the Essence of Video Skill. Oh, the Essence of Video Skill. I have no idea. So Jarmo, that's interesting. 1979, the year that Magic Realm came out, by the way. 1979, Wizard, stay, you shall not pass. Good Lord, there. You know what? Just things from 1979 don't tend to be very sturdy. At any rate, so Jarmo, all I could think of from about that time, as far as like trippy, mind-blowing-y kind of stuff, there's a Polish writer named Stanislaw Lem, and it is sci-fi. Maybe I can recommend sci-fi. Stanislaw Lem was writing around then in the 70s, and I would just recommend his science fiction collection called Star Diaries. I'm going to come back to that later. I'm cheating and recommending this twice. That's a spoiler. Number 7, Matthew J. Death Road to Canada, a video game. I was like, what is that? I've never heard of that. And I looked it up, and oh, look, I've played it for 0.3 hours. Apparently, it didn't make much of an impression on me. It's a pixelated, roguelike, zombie-ish kind of thing. I'm not entirely sure. But Matthew J., thank you for that recommendation. Being Death Road to Canada, my counter recommendation. And again, I'm sorry, these are requests, not necessarily recommendations. I want to point out, I do understand that some of these might not necessarily be recommendations, so much as, hey, what do you think? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. But my counter recommendation as far as something related to Canada, the movie Goon. And it's a sports movie. I don't even know, first, don't expect me to know about sci-fi. Second, don't expect me to know about comic books. Third, don't expect me to know about sports. That said, I've recommended science fiction, a comic book, and now sports movies. A sports movie, at least. Already defying expectation with this video. Number 8, Bruce G. Rainer Werner Fassbinder's Berlin Alexanderplatz, a 1980 TV show. Now, I actually know Fassbinder's Marriage of Maria Braun. I saw that when I was in college, and oh boy, was I proud of myself for interpreting that it was about Germany in the wake of World War II and the Cold War and the potential devastation of nuclear holocaust. There you go. That was my, again, I was pretty clever to come up with that metaphor for what the movie was about. I don't even know if that's true. I haven't seen it in forever, but that's my familiarity with Fassbinder. There's a Roger Waters album called Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. Yeah, Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking, where there's a lyric fixed on the front of her face was a Fassbinder smile? No, a Fassbinder grin? At any rate, I'm just now realizing Roger Waters references Werner Fassbinder. So that's my other point of reference. So Bruce, if you haven't seen Marriage of Maria Braun, see that, see if you're as smart as I am and can figure out that it's about the Cold War. You may not, it might be over your head. Eric G. would like a recommendation of Roll for the Galaxy. He says he loves Race for the Galaxy as a 2-player game, and he's curious about Roll for the Galaxy, which I have right here. I happen to have played this. I won't go into too much detail, but I will tell you one thing about Roll for the Galaxy. Roll for the Galaxy is the second loudest board game I have ever played. comes with these little plastic cups, and there's dice. And depending on what kind of an empire you have, you put your dice in the little plastic cup, and then on each turn you shake it, and you pour out the dice, and then whatever die faces are showing, that's what you have to deal with. All right, you might want to turn the volume down on your computer there. Ready for this? Here's what it sounds like when you're playing Roll for the Galaxy. Remember, this is 2 to 5 players doing this at the same time. Ready? Oh my God, the hearing damage. So, second loudest game I've ever played. First loudest game I've ever played, Captain Sonar. All right, that's Eric Gagner's pick. My counter recommendation. This just came out, and he actually mentioned this, so it's not much of a recommendation when the person already brought it up. Look at this. The iPad version of Race for the Galaxy. It is pretty slick so far. So, as if you needed me to tell you that, Eric, play that. Number 10, Soren H., The Autopsy of Jane Doe. Now, I'd heard of this movie. It's a catchy title, right? You're like, who is Jane Doe? What's the big deal about her autopsy? Isn't it the point of somebody being called Jane Doe? Is they're unremarkable? You don't know who they are. They're not identified. Seems like the most boring autopsy ever. Well, Soren pointed out that this is the director, a Norwegian fella, who did a movie called Troll Hunter. And I hadn't kept up with him. I didn't know what he'd been doing. So this is his next thing after Troll Hunter, is Autopsy of Jane Doe. Soren, my counter recommendation is The Corpse of Anna Fritz, a Spanish movie, which has an incredibly ghastly scene in it that you'll know what it is. You'll know what I'm talking about when you see it. All right, so Corpse of Anna Fritz, my recommendation, Soren's request, Autopsy of Jane Doe. Chris Markinson says he's toying between requesting this comic book called Elektra Assassin. Oh God, here I am about comic books, which I've read. You know what? Scrap everything I said. I know all about comic books. I can tell you all about them. Elektra Assassin, early. Is it Frank Miller? I'm going to go back to confessing that I know nothing about comic books. At any rate, Chris was saying, maybe I'll request that, but I'm going to alternate it with Fight Club, the book, by Chuck Palahniuk. Did I pronounce that correctly? Which I've never read. I've read Choke. I have not read Fight Club, but I would be interested to, and Chris requests that. My counter recommendation, and this is a tough one, because having not read any Chuck Palahniuk, I couldn't, other than Choke, I didn't really have any firm footing for recommending another Palahniuk novel. So what I thought of is, okay, what's a seminal movie, a movie that everybody loves, that has a kind of a unique place amongst movies, where the source material is still worth reading, like it stands on its own. And what I came up with, this might sound a little weird, John Carpenter's The Thing, an amazing movie, not a remake of the one with James Arness in the carrot outfit. It is instead much more closely based on a John Campbell, it's a short story really, called Who Goes There? And that's what I recommend. Who Goes There? You can find it online. It's super short, but I think that even after having seen The Thing, it is instructive to go back and read that John Campbell short story from 1938, I think. It's super old. And this brings me to, this is more like show and tell than Patreon requests. Where did I put this? Speaking of old things, this is the oldest thing I'm going to show you today. So John Campbell, genre science fiction writer, wrote a lot of stuff. I found this once in a bookstore. Actually, yeah, I think it was like wrapped in plastic. It might have been, it was like 75 cents, I think. And if you see, it's a John Campbell book. It's a novel. And I mainly got it for the artwork. I actually didn't realize when I bought it, this is the guy who wrote Who Goes There, the thing was based on. But the cool thing about it, and one of the reasons I bought it, watch this. It's like a magic trick. It's a whole separate book. And again, that artwork, I love that. Look at that. Can you see that? It's so evocative. What is that monster? What is it doing to them? What is this spaceship? Why are these people floating around outside of it? Now, I did try to read this, and well, that didn't last. I can tell you though, at least John Campbell's Who Goes There holds up. As for The Planeteers and The Ultimate Weapon, I'm afraid I can't say the same. That was, oh my God, we're going so slow, apologies. Do you have anywhere to be? No? Okay. That was Chris M's request for Fight Club, number 11. Number 12, Mitchell E. Gilmore Girls, really? So all I know about Gilmore Girls is it's David Kelly and chicks dig it, and I think they talk really fast, and the girl from Bad Santa is in it. And I think someone named Rory is in it. One of the characters, Rory. One's Gilmore and one's Rory, right? I don't know. So of these things, when I looked up Gilmore Girls, I realized only about half of them were true. The David Kelly thing is Ally McBeal. I have, until I looked this up earlier today, gone through a lot of my life not quite appreciating that Ally McBeal and Gilmore Girls are different things. I mean, I would have known if you asked me, but things I knew about one, I thought applied to the other. So at any rate, if Gilmore Girls, which is number 12, Mitchell E's pick is rolled, I'll know a lot more about Gilmore Girls. My counter recommendation, Mitchell E., have you seen Fleabag? Phoebe Waller-Bridge? If you haven't, everyone, good God, it's brilliant. Fleabag is an amazing piece of work. I think I've said that on this video before, so I'll say it again. There's my counter recommendation, Gilmore Girls. All right, let's see. Number 13. Okay. Don't know anything about this. Sam H. said there's a British TV series called Utopia, and that's his request. And he mentions it. I think all he told me about it was that it has a soundtrack by Cristobal Tapia de Veer, a Dutch South African, who did the music for a movie I just saw for the Quarter to Three movie podcast called The Girl with All the Gifts. And unfortunately, we didn't mention the music in that, which we should have, because it's, I don't want to say too much about the movie, it has an unusual soundtrack. The kind of movie it is tends to go for different types of soundtracks than what Girl with All the Gifts has. It's kind of like a cross between a murmur and a lullaby. If you know the Radiohead song, Everywhere, Everything in Its Place. I even wrote the name down. What the heck is... I never know the names of Radiohead songs. Like, I know the song, but I can't think of what goofy name they called it. Everything in Its Place, right? Vanilla Sky, I think that's where you might know it from. That Radiohead song, the Girl with All the Gifts soundtrack kind of sounds like that murmuring bit of that Radiohead song, which I'm not going to sing for you. So at any rate, this fella, Cristobal Tapia de Veer, did the soundtrack for Girl with All the Gifts and this British TV series called Utopia that Sam H is recommending. So Sam H, I'm going to recommend something to you based only on the soundtrack. Now, I was toying with whether or not to tell you this, but I'll go ahead and tell you. What I'm recommending is awful. It is a terrible, horrible, insufferably painful movie, with the exception of a woman named Bo Garrett. But I'm going to recommend the music for the movie Tron Legacy. Is that what it's called? Anyway, the recent Tron reboot thing. Daft Punk soundtrack, phenomenal. The rest of the movie, you just have to sit through it to enjoy the music. So there you go. There's my counter recommendation. Tron Legacy. Good Lord, I never thought I'd tell someone to... You know what? Put it on and then just turn off your monitor and leave the speakers on. Let's see. Okay, here we go. 14. Sean K. noted in a write-up I did for... where did I mention this? Oh, the Rick and Morty write-up. I mentioned in passing that I hadn't seen Scarface, Brian De Palma thing with Al Pacino. I've not seen Scarface. Sean K. was like, well, you know what? Fix that. That's my request. A review of Scarface. All right. My counter recommendation. So one of the reasons I haven't seen Scarface, I've sort of mentally put it in that slot of where Al Pacino just jumped the rails and started yelling a lot. Don't know if that's the case, but I'm going to go ahead and counter recommend just classic, heartbreakingly good Al Pacino in Dog Day Afternoon, which is a Sidney Lumet movie from, 1975. Also heartbreaking, John Cazale is in it. Who else is in it? Lance Henriksen. You'll see Lance Henriksen. I think Charles Durning is the cop, whatever. Chris Sarandon in a robe, if you're into that kind of thing. But Dog Day Afternoon is, I'd say my favorite Pacino movie. I'm going to go ahead and say that. I'm not a big fan of, it's fine, The Godfather, whatever. It's like Citizen Kane. Yeah, people love it. Sure, it's great. But, I'm a Dog Day Afternoon guy. So, Sean K., Scarface, right back at you with Dog Day Afternoon. Number 15, Juan R. cheated and chose two things and then tried to justify it by saying they have themes in common. And his two things, and by the way, fair enough, Juan R., I'm sold. His two things are both anime, one called Your Name, which I've heard plenty about in the sense that I know people who've seen it and have said you should see it, and that's all I've heard about it. And Wolf Children. Juan R. requests to write up of both of those. All right. Well, while we're thinking of, what have I written here? Oh, while we're thinking of movies that are thematically related, Juan R., I'm just going to throw two back at you, Coraline and Pan's Labyrinth. Only one of them is a cartoon, though. All right. Like I said, some of these aren't going to be as well thought out as others. Number 16, Clay H. requests Hacky Zack. Don't know what that is. He didn't say much about it, so looking it up, he didn't say anything about it. He gave me a Steam link. On Steam, it looks to me like it's soccer meets Breakout meets a 2D platformer. Now, I know Clay H enough to trust that I don't think he's griefing me, so he probably thinks this is pretty cool. And unfortunately, my only counter recommendation for something like that, Clay, have you played Peggle? Everybody's played Peggle, right? Peggle's pretty cool. Things bouncing around, stuff happening, right? So that's all I got, Clay H. Sorry, Peggle. But that's his pick. Number 16, Hacky Zack. Number 17, Sam S. What looks like a fairly erudite book called The Hatred of Poetry by Ben Lerner. Speaking of erudite, get it? Which seems to really be a book about why poetry has a bad rap. Which I concede it does. I don't read poetry. That's for freshman English majors, right? Who reads poetry? So this book by Ben Lerner is apparently by that, and Sam S. requests that. And I was trying to think, what's the last poetry that I actually sat down and read? I mean, I don't know. Geez. Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock? Anyway, in trying to think about, well, if I was to have to recommend poetry, what am I going to recommend that's not something that everybody already knows like that? And this is a weird thing, but the last thing where I thought, this is kind of like poetry, and it's as good as good poetry. The game Bastion. I think the writing in Bastion it qualifies as good poetry. So there you go. There's my counter recommendation, is Bastion. Number 18, Gene V. Oops, did I write? Oh, no, okay. Gene V. Gene V. You're all over the map here. First of all, if you've requested something a previous month and you don't want to have to think up a new thing every month, I am totally okay with you just requesting the same thing over and over again. That is fine. Don't think that it is a failure of imagination on your part, that I'm expecting something new every month. Don't worry about that. Because I think Gene V. Said he was worried about his recurring requests for Life is Strange, a video game, as being boring. Gene V, request that till the cows come home. I'm okay with that. So, but what he did, if you think Juan R. cheated by requesting two things, Gene V kind of threw three things at me and was like, pick any one of these. So, Gene, I'm going to go with Life is Strange because it seems like that's something that means a lot to you. I tried to play it. I say tried to play it, I actually did play it, got a little ways into it and sort of saw the premise of it and moved on to something else and never got back to it. But I've heard a lot of good things about Life is Strange. I'm curious about where it goes. So of the three things you chose, I'm going to go ahead and let that be your pick. If you feel otherwise in the future, be sure to let me know. But the other things he mentioned were What We Do in the Shadows, a mockumentary by, I'm going to attempt his name without looking at my notes. Waititi? Oh, good Lord. Waititi, whatever. Taika Waititi is a New Zealander. That's one of the states in Australia. Queensland, North Barrier Reef, New Zealand, Tasmania, right? That's how it goes. I know a lot about Australian geography. This Waititi, I feel like I'm screwing that name up. What We Do in the Shadows is his mockumentary about vampires. And Gene V says that he has seen Hunt for the Wilder People, and he really liked it, but he hasn't seen What We Do in the Shadows. And he requested a review of that. Now, I think they're very different. What We Do in the Shadows is very much a goof. Hunt for the Wilder People was very proud of its heart, kind of like it was a comedy, but it was very earnest about its kind of emotion, I think. And it didn't really work for me. I can appreciate some of the things in it. I loved seeing Sam Neill as a gruff old bastard. But they're very different movies. So liking one, I don't think means necessarily you would like the other. That said, What We Do in the Shadows, a little uneven, but I quite enjoyed it. Rhys Darby, anything with him, I'll watch. He's great as a werewolf in that. Really, where you want to go, of course, and you might know this, is Flight of the Conchords. And then the third thing he mentioned was... So I'd actually heard of this, Gene. Nadja, a movie from the 90s with, it's like a indie vampire movie with Peter Fonda. And I'm almost positive I've seen that. But that was the other thing that Gene mentioned. So my counter recommendation, going off of Nadja instead of Life is Strange or What We Do in the Shadows, a Larry Fessenden movie called Habit. Also, probably the 90s. Larry Fessenden is an indie filmmaker from New York. He does horror. And Habit is also kind of a vampire movie that features my favorite line flub. There's a scene where he's in a bathtub and he's talking to a woman and he flubs his line, and he kept that take because it's an incredibly honest moment. And it's actually Larry Fessenden himself acting. His work is of varying quality, but Habit is an early bit of genius from Larry Fessenden, I think. Indie genius, keep in mind, very guerrilla filmmaking, rough edges, but still ingenious. Number 19, Scott D. All right, Scott. So he just said The Orphan Master's Son, a book by Adam Johnson. Now, Scott told me here's what he wrote about it. His words speak better than what I can say. He calls it contemporary literary fiction with a keen eye for keeping the reader engaged and entertained while dealing with pretty fucking heavy stuff, Scott D says. Okay. However, that's a tough act to follow in terms of recommending something. So what I'm going to do, Scott, is I'm going to flip this on its head, and I'm going to recommend the opposite of what you just recommended. And I did verify, these are still available. This is something called, so it sounds like Orphan Master's Son is pretty exciting, compelling stuff. Here I'm going to recommend the opposite. Can you read that? Boring Postcards. This is an actual book. It's a volume of them. These are postcards. They're all boring. Look at these. You know, for the rest of the video, I'm just going to show you each of these. Boring postcards. Oh, blank page. It's more boring than any postcard in this book. Irony, Scott. Irony. And then finally, number 20. Oops, I don't want to abuse my fine volume of Boring Postcards. There's actually 2 volumes of these. I've got another volume, Boring Postcards USA, which I take to mean this is the international version. And then finally, thanks for bearing with me. And if you didn't, I hope you just fast forwarded. Greg Ree, and Soren H has actually requested this for my live streaming. The Sexy Brutale, I don't know. Love the artwork. The brief Steam description said something about time looping. Don't know. Looks cool. I'm looking forward to playing it. So that's Gregory's request for number 20. And here's where I'm going to cheat. And for a counter recommendation, when I saw time looping, my go-to recommendation for time looping is The Seventh Voyage of Ejon Tichy. I am never sure how to say that. It's a Polish thing. Oddly enough, the first bit in Starship Diaries, the Stanislaw Lem thing I referenced earlier, is this is organized like the voyages of a Captain Ejon Tichy. Ejon Tichy, I don't know how to say his name. And the seventh voyage is, well, we'll just say time looping is involved. And it's vintage Stanislaw Lem. It's great stuff. So there you go. There's my counter recommendation. All right, good Lord, I've taken so much of your time. Let's go ahead and go to randomresult.com and have it give us a number. Let me get out of my Race for the Galaxy game. Have it give us a number between 1 and 20. Nice and symmetrical. This time I'm only going to choose one thing, hopefully. All right, random result, give me a number between 1 and 20. All right, here we go. And I'm just going to not even look. All right, let's get my, oh, good Lord. All right, here we go. There, it went, right? What is that number? Can you guys see it? I'm going to try to look at the viewfinder. Wait. Nope. I've drag selected the word distinct. All right, let's try that again. At least I made something happen, right? Okay, here we go. Oh, is it going? Is it going? Yeah, it's 11. 11. I don't remember what 11 is. 11 is Chris Markinson, Fight Club, written by Chuck Palahniuk. If you're just breathy, there's a lot of H's and U's in his name, so just say something breathy, and it's probably, I think he's Ukrainian. Is that Ukrainian? I don't know the answer to that. So there you go. That's now in the queue, is the book Fight Club. So thank you guys for bearing with me. I don't know that I can keep pace with 20 separate recommendations a month. I don't know that much stuff, but I'll see what I can do. Hope you've enjoyed this. So stick around. I have pending write-ups of The Wire, which I'm about to start. Magic Realm, right here. The Confessions of St. Augustine, the Bishop of Hippo, and now Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great month, and I'll be back in touch with you in about a month to get more recommendations. Cheers.